Greetings, dear ladies. I am Kryon of Magnetic Service. I know where I am, I know who is listening, I know what you're here for. This is a time, and it always is, a short time. It's a time of honoring, and it's not just the feminine honoring. It's about a specific time, about something that is now reoccurring on the planet. The reason you sit here, and we have said this before, is because you are starting to mirror some of the wisdom that was that place we call Lemuria. And in order for me to do this in the ways that we do it, I again remind you that I am genderless. I remind you that I speak to you now in the male voice because that is all my partner has. I am genderless. My partner steps aside completely, so that I can speak to you of remembrances, of honorings. And all through this channel and all through this evening, the invitation is to remember. It is confusing for some of you, especially with what I'm going to tell you next. Confusing that the odds would have you in Lemuria during a time when we are speaking of and you being female then and now. I will tell you, this is not anything about chance or odds. Old soul, as a female, you are here to reawaken some of the energies that you carried then. In order for me to give you those and to honor this time, I then give you information about everyday life, about the things that perhaps were there. And yet in doing so, I have to qualify myself, and I'm going to now. When am I speaking about? And why are the things important that I speak of? Lemuria has a very rich history, and it's different from perhaps the other time capsules that were on the planet where civilization and seeding began of an awakened human being. That is, a human being who had the knowledge of light and dark. That's what we're talking about. A place that originated this. And therefore we're talking about tens of thousands of years. My partner speaks about something that has not been proven geologically. I will tell you that eventually they will find evidence that the hot spot underneath Hawaii pushed up that mountain so that it was very high above the earth, also expanding the landmass to a geologist, an honest mini-continent. And what I mean by that is one that meets the criteria of a mini-continent. Above the earth, that is to say, a very high mountain was produced. Now this is something we have told you before. What we didn't tell you is that in geological terms, it took a long time to be pushed up and a long time to sink. It didn't fully sink. It sank only to the tips of the island, which are today the Hawaiian Islands. So the part of Lemuria that was what I will call the sinking years spanned many lifetimes. These lifetimes were frightening to many because the island was continuing to sink. It was obvious to many, however, that you had time. It wasn't something that sunk quickly, but it still was something that kept you literally from doing certain things. And that fell upon the women. I now want to give you some information, a continuation of tonight's channeling. Reincarnation. In the beginning, reincarnation to Lemuria was a launching pad for the Akash. And what I mean by this is that you only had one life in Lemuria. You can understand why the temple of rejuvenation was so important. You understood reincarnation. Dear ones, this is intuitive to humanity. The first organized spiritual systems on this planet believed in reincarnation because they knew it absolutely was part of it. It's only been in modern spiritual days where you were talked out of it. So it is first intuitive kinds of human thought. You had it also in Lemuria. The Pleiadian teachers also told you literally about the Akashic launching system. A system where you only had one lifetime through Lemuria, and the next ones were passed on to other parts of the planet. This was because Lemuria was a pressure cooker of wisdom. No one could leave. No one could come. You didn't meet anybody. The traditions survived a very long time. The only thing you have even close to it on this planet is in Australia with the Aborigine. Thousands and thousands of years of one culture builds wisdom, and you are part of that. So the time frame we are talking about are the sinking years of Lemuria, the lifetimes that were lived there. You were not all there at the same time, but you participated in the same kind of rituals and honorings in birth ceremonies because they never changed. So what I talk to you now about is not about family camaraderie where you were all together in one spot. I talk about the fact that you were all participating in the same kind of thing in the lifetime you spent there. Now, you knew about this reincarnation, that a life would come in, a soul would be launched from Lemuria. It would have no Akash at all until it got somewhere else and would reincarnate in Europe. And then it would have the Akash of a sinking island. Welcome to the sinking island syndrome, Atlantis. This is why so many place Atlantis in the Pacific when it really was in the Atlantic. The actual place called Atlantis, there were 3 of them. They were all in different places. But they echoed the sinking island Akash of the Lemurian. And so that which is Atlantis is complex, for it responds to many Akashic energies that you combine into one feeling, and yet it started in Lemuria. We talk about you in those years, for this is an advanced Lemuria. Like the Aborigine, you had come to a conclusion of what worked and what did not work, and were building upon the wisdom of it. And so we are in these years when we talk about the traditions, who you are, and what you did. And I wanted you to know that. Perhaps you didn't understand that. Because, dear ladies, when you understand you are the Akashic launching pad of the earth, in those years, it was all about reproduction. One life. Every child you had would not have another life on Lemuria, and neither would you. It changed things. I want to tell you some things that I've never broached before, and my partner would have no idea. I want to talk about the importance of your reproduction. I want to talk about the honoring of it. And just briefly, a couple of the attributes that perhaps you would not expect. Because of the honor of birth and what the Pleiadians had given you and the traditions of it, you controlled it. Birth on Lemuria was done seasonal. Reproduction was not 24/7 as it is here. It was seasonal. taking a clue perhaps from the animal kingdom that you could not even see, for there weren't many there. It was done seasonally. And this was for food, but not exactly, for fish was the staple. It was intuitive. It also kept the population in check, and it made sense. Imagine wise reproduction. This was something that the men cooperated with fully, for they understood the same things you did. But let me tell you something that you don't know. I want to talk about something my partner has no clue. He stepped aside. I want to talk about menses. There are places, and you have heard, where the societies will not let a woman in a certain condition in a certain place because of this. The attitudes regarding it became archaic compared to the way they were in Lemuria. You see, part of a woman was the privilege of menses. And when you were in that condition, you were raised above goddess. You sat in the front rows of all the ceremonies. Everyone knew it. You wore a certain color, and it wasn't red, to indicate your status at the moment. Reproduction was important. The launch pad of the Akash for humanity was yours, and you were careful. So honored was it, Mele'ha, that this is one of the chief reasons for the temple of rejuvenation. So you'd always be young and have menses. It's a little different now, isn't it? I want you to think of this. Honoring of the feminine and beyond. And so it is.